First came the rain, day upon day of incessant rain, never-ending, constantly falling, and the rivers rose, not just the Ohio, but many, most all rivers in mid-America. And then, flood. This was Louisville, the mighty Ohio, no longer gracefully sweeping up over the gateway to the south, but viciously cutting across, around, amidst Kentucky's biggest city. This was the scene at Broadway where the Ballard Mills are located. And across the river, this was what New Albany, Indiana looked like in 1937. And this, 4th and Broadway, in the heart of downtown Louisville. Eventually, the Ohio reached an all-time high of 57 1/10 feet, something the experts said was impossible. At some points in the city, water was exceedingly deep. Tens of thousands of people were evacuated, all of the West End, much of the downtown area, as this pickup at the Berkeley Hotel indicates. Today, this is how we know the handsome Warren Presbyterian Church at 4th and Broadway. It's hard to conceive that 20 years ago, it looked like this. And looking north from that church today, we see the main artery in Louisville's pulsing heart, the city's busy 4th Street. Can you envision 4th Street as newspaper photographer H. Harold Davis described it?
Mainly it was a very austere site, particularly 4th Street. That people were just walking down the street, down the center of the street generally, aimlessly, heading no place. There was no place to go.
For this was 4th Street in 1937, from the wet end looking north. It was the most awful flood in the city's history, a nightmare that eventually caused some $52 million damage in Louisville alone, $400 to $500 million in damage across the entire Ohio Valley. This train managed to make it out of New Albany going north, one of many carrying refugees from the area. This was the L&N Railroad Yards. The line later ran this picture in an ad which read, "Sorry you were delayed, neighbor, but we had water down our way." City Hall was on the edge of a dry island inside the city and became the nerve center for relief activity. Mayor Neville Miller went to WHAS and broadcast an appeal for help. It didn't take long in coming. On January 27th, a crack contingent of police flew here from Philadelphia. In addition to city police and Pennsylvania state troopers, others came from Boston, Chicago, almost everywhere. Some towns with a one-man police force sent that one man. The Penn Dennis Club became a barracks for these men. Coast Guardsmen came from all over. Striking longshoremen came from New York, bringing boats with them. Other help came, technical tools like this emergency power equipment from Harriman, Tennessee, to help run Louisville's telephone communications. Or a carload of milk from Chicago, unloaded at a flooded railroad yard and carried by boat to Louisville's children. Medical supplies came from all over. Typhoid injections were given to everyone, and Louisville was spared the horror of a typhoid epidemic. And the evacuations continued all over the city, people saving what they could. Rarely did they manage to save much. The morgue was underwater, but that was as close as the city came to affirming reports of bodies underwater, for only a handful died here. Digging trenches for the rumored dead at Caveville Cemetery was unneeded, for the Louisville dead were few. A miracle indeed. Today, the water company's pumping station is just another building on Upper River Road, but water supply was vital in 1937, and for a while it was rationed 2 hours a day because the station was underwater. But outside of a short 13-hour stretch, it kept in operation, using a tugboat steam engine to keep the pumps running at one point. Today, Baxter Avenue is just a street that gets tight with traffic at supper time. In 1937, it was the only link between downtown Louisville and the Dry Highlands, as a fabulous pontoon bridge was built on whiskey barrels. 1,400 feet long, it linked the city center with the rest of Louisville. Its secret was its pliability, and it rose and fell with the current of the waters. In all, an estimated 25,000 people used the famous bridge. Today at 3rd and York stands Louisville's library, high and dry. Abe Lincoln erect and proud on the library lawn. But in 1937, Abe Lincoln walked on water. A freakish picture as waters reached the book-laden building. Edna Grauman, head of the reference room, described it this way.
It almost breaks your heart to walk into a building that you've worked in for years and is lovely and see it just look like, a perfect mess.
And in the basement of the library, this was the magnificent little theater, but no showings on this day. As for the books, they were water-soaked and swollen, snapping steel supports and bookcases. In all, 30,000 volumes were waterlogged. They were later shipped in 3 freight cars to Philadelphia, dried in the ovens of an auto enameling plant, taken apart, chemically treated, and rebound. It cost almost $50,000, but the library saved many a rare volume. And flood or no flood, the people had their Courier Journal. This edition printed on emergency presses at Shelbyville. Later issues published out of Lexington by part of the staff, while the rest of the staff stayed with it in the Courier building at 3rd and Liberty. In that building, as then managing editor, Neil Dalton describes it.
First of all, it was cold, and I think that's the thing you remember always is the horrible cold. You never could get warm. The offices were no lights, no electric lights. They were short. And the dark corridors. After a while, it's a clammy type of feeling.
The wall signs in the building told the story as well as anything. The story of publishing under conditions that one newsman later described as a nightmare. Yet the paper never missed a day of publication, and it published the vital lists of evacuees and where they had been taken to, in and out of Louisville. And the staff did its best to take care of its own needs. Elsewhere in that same building was WHAS, and into this microphone still preserved at the station today were broadcast the famous send-a-boat messages. Send a boat here, send a boat there. Staff members and volunteers from the Courier and from elsewhere in downtown Louisville took the distress calls by phone, while emergency equipment fed the station to WSM in Nashville, which erased its own broadcast for 82 hours to carry the WHAS messages across the nation. Send a boat, as one of the WHAS announcers of that day, Foster Brooks, put it.
It kind of made you feel a little strange to be sitting there putting those calls out, wondering how long you were going to be able to do it when the weather might be such that we couldn't put the calls out.
It was radio put to a use never before imagined, telling the story of a stricken city to the world, while it helped direct the emergency activities of that city. Later, it helped residents know what happened to their loved ones. This is Pete Monroe, chief announcer at WHAS. His was among the voices heard. He died in December of that year. In downtown Louisville, a plaque to his memory is tribute to the work done 20 years ago, both by men on the air and hundreds of unsung heroes behind the scenes. At Algonquin Parkway and other dry areas, tent cities were constructed. This one was at LaGrange, and the people of Louisville, many hundreds of them, found a new way of life, one they had never dreamed possible. Some found places in the homes of friends or of strangers who soon became friends, but many went to the tent cities like this one at Clark Park. And family life went on as best it could, and the cleaning up went on, like pumping out the basement of Stewart's store on 4th Street, or sweeping out the Ohio Theater, a refugee center inside, Red Cross headquarters upstairs. Boats were stranded by departing waters, this one at 39th and Market. This one right on Broadway, across from the Broke Ballard sales room. Sunday dinner was sometimes strange, as here on 42nd Street, Dad cooks over one washtub while Mom cleans river mud from clothes in another. And autos were steam cleaned as best they could be. In New Albany, firemen hosed down the streets. This is New Albany's Pearl Street as it looks today. Back in 1937, as the waters went down, Pearl Street, New Albany looked like this. Today, residents of that city are familiar with this seed company store. 20 years ago, it looked like this, and its predicted lifespan was labeled less than 20 years. Louisville was only one of many cities hit by the Great Flood. This is Paducah, which was among the hardest hit. Indeed, scarcely a city along the entire 980-mile length of the Great Ohio River escaped that late January and early February rampage. This was Greenup, Newport, Greenup Avenue in Ashland. An Ashland family leaves home. The Carrollton County Courthouse. Some homes in Carrollton. The bridge at Carrollton. No permanence today, lady. And Paducah, downtown. The flood came late to Paducah, being downriver, but it hit the ancient city with as much force as it hit anywhere. 3/4 of Paducah was underwater. Boats plied back and forth, many coming up to the marquee of the Irvin Cobb Hotel. A dark hour for Western Kentucky. And the statue of Chief Paducah in downtown Paducah surveyed a grim scene of nature out of bounds. In Frankfort, a different story. The state prison flooding and Governor A.B. Chandler personally helping evacuate 2,900 inmates. The governor later went on a tour of all stricken cities and, recalling the spirit of the people, said,
"There was not much what you call griping or pleas for sympathy. They just got right up. They just got right up out of the mud and out of the water and started building back. And they did it in a remarkably short time."
Out of the mud and back on their feet. Louisville has many memories of 1937's Great Flood, as indeed does all Kentucky. The Louisville Courier-Journal writer Alan Trout says of 37,
"I've never seen anything like it before or since, and the friendliness and cooperation I saw during the flood has stimulated me through all these years."
flood walls today prevent the 1937 Great Flood from ever returning. But as the then mayor, Neville Miller, recalls, the city gained much through that dread hour.
Looking back over the 20 years, I remember a community in which all its citizens answered the call to duty without hesitation and did what was required to help those in distress. A community which by its actions changed what could have been a disaster from which Louisville would have been years in recovering into another step forward in Louisville's progress. Louisville met the challenges of the flood, and today looks back on what we used to refer to as the damp spell in 1937 with pride and renewed confidence in its ability as a community.